I hope that we will develop practical relations with Russia based on mutual respect and equal treatment. This is our approach to Russia.
Let's bring in Bloomberg's chief Europe correspondent, Oliver Crook. Well, it feels like a pretty significant election result for Bulgaria and, of course, for the EU as well, especially given the appetite here to actually forge closer relations with Russia.
That's right, Jumana. I mean, it's an election that's watched very closely. I mean, all the elections are watched very closely these days from here in Brussels, but it's one that was really driven by the sort of domestic issues within Bulgaria, you know, the 8th election within 5 years. And the good sign from this election is at least for one of political stability. It's an outcome that is fairly decisive. Rumen Radev seems to be carrying away the sort of majority there to be able to form a stable government after months of protest, after years of political deadlock. So from that perspective, certainly a sort of welcoming sign, perhaps a little bit less welcoming here in Brussels are some of this commentary vis-a-vis Russia and the Kremlin. That being said, I think we're tempted to make a lot of analogies between Bulgaria and Hungary, particularly with Viktor Orban having been voted out, someone who's been very, very pro-Kremlin, and now Radev being sort of brought in. I think that his approach is going to be much more pragmatic, much less confrontational when it comes to the European Union. He did say he wants a more practical relationship with the Russians, but he also said he wants to make every effort to continue Bulgaria on its European path, a European path for Bulgaria that began back in 2007 when they joined the EU and sort of continued this year when they joined the Eurozone, though Radev himself had actually campaigned against joining the Euro. But again, I think a much more practical figure than what we're used to in the form of Viktor Orban here going forward in Bulgaria.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about last week's Hungarian election. What progress has there been on Hungary approving that EU funding for Ukraine now?
So it looks like that could actually potentially be approved this week. So this is something that could actually be approved under Viktor Orban if his outgoing government. We're still waiting for the Magyar government to be fully assembled. That is likely to take hold at some point in the month of May. That being said, the sort of holdup, the reason that Orban gave for blocking that 90 billion euro loan to the Ukrainians was that damaged pipeline that was carrying crude oil from Russia through Ukraine to Hungary. It was damaged. Orban was accusing the Ukrainians basically of not fixing it. It now seems that oil will now be flowing back into Hungary. And so as a consequence, you could have actually Orban himself lifting that veto. And that is just sort of one side of things that is obviously extremely important to the Ukrainians. Zelensky has called it a matter of survival to get that money in order to keep the nation solvent, both militarily, but also for its budget. But there are other issues for Magyar and the Hungarians. They're also trying to unlock some of those EU funds. There are 20 billion euros of the EU funds that have been stuck on the sidelines because of some of the anti-democratic proposals that Orban has put into power. Magyar wants to unlock those, and some of that money will expire by August. And that is something that we understand this weekend. We had European officials over in Budapest to talk about it with Peter Magyar. We also understand that his third destination to visit will be Brussels sometime next month to try to get the ball rolling to unlock some of that money. And we should say, Jumana, that 20 billion euros sitting on the sideline, that's a lot of money for Hungary. That's almost 7% of the economy. So really going to be a priority for Magyar to unlock that money.